Hi, I'm Mia Brooks, and welcome back to Storytime with Brooks. Today we will be continuing reading through Kidnapping Grimm, and we find ourselves at Chapter 9. So without further ado, here is Chapter 9. Chapter 9. A Murderer in My Dreams. Ember, 1 year ago. We're all killers. We've all killed pieces of ourselves to survive. We've all got blood on our hands. Something, somewhere, had to die so we could stay alive. If memories could bleed, if dreams could scream. M.A.W. I woke up screaming, clawing at the covers that were wrapped around my arms and legs as I frantically shrieked for Evadne. She was right there, calling my name as she held my hand, smoothing back limp strands of hair from my damp forehead. I was drenched, my clothes and sheets soaked with a horrendous amount of sweat, giving testament to how long I had been trapped within the nightmare. Not real, not real. Evadne's face was right in front of me. She was still alive, well and healthy. It hadn't been real. She was on the ground in front of me, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. I pushed the image away, hands shaking as I pulled Evadne into a fierce hug. Mom and Dad burst into our room, fear and worry evident on their faces. "It's okay," Evadne said quietly. She woke up. "What happened?" Mom asked as she sat down on the edge of my bed. "It was just a bad dream," I mumbled. "Do you want to talk about it, sweetheart?" My hands were sweaty around the handle of the knife. I couldn't let go. I couldn't stop myself. Afraid. So afraid. I shook my head, closing my eyes as I tried to block out the image. I could never tell them of the horror that I had witnessed in this nightmare, the things that I had done, the things I couldn't stop. Not real. It was just a dream. It wasn't real. It'll never be real because I'm not the seer. The stars and galaxies shone within the depths of Evadne's eyes as she stared at me, afraid. "Em," she whispered softly. "Fey used to have nightmares like this," I whispered hoarsely. Mom and Dad exchanged a look, sharing a million fears and words all at once. "It was just a nightmare, sweetheart," Mom soothed gently. "It doesn't mean anything." The doubt in her voice gave her away. We all knew what it meant. The beginning of what we had been dreading for years. It means everything. This is how it had started. The nightmares, the screaming, the insomnia, and then they took her from us. He had called it the sickness, and he said that he would come back when Evadne and I showed the symptoms. We don't have much time left. They're coming for us. How much longer do we have before they come? "We'll tell F about it when he comes next," Mom said quietly. "It's going to be okay." Evadne glanced at the clock. It read 5:49 a.m. "There's no use going back to bed now," she said quietly, her eyes miles away. Unfortunately, she was right. I would need to change the sheets before I could even consider going back to bed, at which point I would be awake, and there would be no use in trying to sleep longer. Oh no, I'm becoming an early bird. Kill me now. "I'm going to make a pot of tea, I think," Mom murmured. "I'll make a pot of coffee," Dad replied. "Can't expect to function on that pretentious leaf water," he joked half-heartedly. I managed a weak smile before I began to pull the sheets from the bed. "Don't drink it all," I muttered, trying to force my tone of voice into that of laughter. Unspoken words hung heavily around us, and after another moment, Mom and Dad both left. Evadne's eyes were still miles away as she perched on the edge of her bed, hugging her knees to her chest. Evadne's lifeless eyes stared up at me, the galaxies within them dead and empty. The knife trembled in my hand. "Eva! Oh, Eva!" My voice was shifting into a scream I didn't recognize, feral with grief and rage. Not real. Not real. "I was hoping that we'd be able to find a way to escape before this happened," Evadne whispered, as I bundled up the sheets and tossed them at the doorway. I would take them to the washroom when I went downstairs. Anger flooded through me, hot and heavy. It wasn't fair. None of this was fair, but this was how it was, and there was no way to escape or stop it. I wrestled against the rising emotions that threatened to suffocate me. The darkness stirred beneath my bed. Tristan's face formed at the edge of my bed frame, worry plainly written across the swirling shadows of his face. I shrugged. turning my attention back to Evadne. Tears were gathering in the corners of her eyes, and she sniffed quietly. I perched beside her, pulling her into a tight hug. Just because the nightmare started doesn't mean it's over right away. But he said, I know, but it's not bad yet. Besides, how are they going to know? They're off in their magical fairy world. They're probably so busy being horrible, nasty creatures that they forgot all about us. She laughed weakly, but the humor faded from her eyes almost as soon as it entered, replaced once again by that empty hopelessness. It's the first one, I said quietly, rubbing gentle circles in her back. Fey had hers for months and months before they came. She was 18. We're 20 now. Things have already stretched out further for us. Who knows? This could just be nothing. It could all mean absolutely nothing. Evadne shook her head. The way you were screaming and... What? I had a horrible nightmare too. Shadows around us. Evadne in front of me. A gash on her forehead and a split lip showing stark against her pale face. Hair straggling wildly around her terrified eyes. Please, she rasped. What was it about? I asked, forcing back my nightmare and the horror within. She shuddered. I don't want to talk about it. That's okay. I don't want to talk about mine either. I don't want to ever admit my subconscious came up with such horrendous things. I've got such a bad feeling, Em, she whispered. We stood on a cliff with the remains of an ancient kingdom looming over us, jagged and pointed like knives in the sky. A tall figure emerged from the mist, death and evil radiating from it in waves as ravens screeched overhead. I know, I soothed. It's going to be okay. She nodded quietly, her eyes miles and miles away. I was fighting with every ounce of my strength, trying to stop my arm as it rose, the knife clutched in my fingertips, its point aimed at Evadne. I pulled myself back to the present, fighting the flashback, fighting to block it from my mind. I don't want to remember. I don't want to remember that anymore. Silver flashed in the dim light, and I couldn't look away from the pained look on Evadne's face as she collapsed with a gurgling cry, blood rushing from her neck. I was screaming her name as the knife fell from my fingertips, and I found myself in control of my body once more. I'm afraid, Evadne whispered. I shivered, trying to push the dream from my mind. I am too, I murmured. Thank you for tuning in to this week's chapter. I hope that you guys all have a wonderful week. And as always, thank you for your continued support. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time. Bye.